What's up guys, Jordy here. Welcome back to another video. Today let's talk about how to take $1,000 and turn it into a pro sounding electric guitar rig. Today we're going to talk primarily about the pedals and the amp, assuming that you already have some sort of electric guitar. If you don't already have an electric guitar, check the description below for some budget-friendly recommendations. We're going to talk about everything: patch cables, power, the pedals, the pedal board, an amp, and even a tuner. And so I want to get started off by talking about the pedals. The first pedal on the board is the Electro Harmonix Soulfood. The Soulfood is a killer sounding overdrive that's been compared to the Klon Centaur. If you know anything about the Klon Centaur, then you know that to buy one of those, it would take the entirety of our budget for today's project, plus probably a little bit more. The Soulfood is a really versatile overdrive that can do everything from just chimey sounding breakup on the far left side of the drive knob to really gritty, sort of gnarly overdrive on the far right side of the drive knob. The tone knob is really responsive, and you could even just push the front end of your amp by turning the drive side down and the volume wide open. So it really is a really versatile overdrive. And coming in at just under 80 bucks, I thought it was a good pick for today's build. Next up in the pedal chain is the JHS Pink Panther digital delay. It has built-in tap tempo, it has 2 different modulation settings, it has subdivisions, and it even has a digital or tape emulation. So some of you are probably wondering, why pick the JHS Pink Panther when we've only got $1,000 to spend? Because coming in at $250, it takes up a significant portion of our overall budget for the whole build. Well, I think when we're building a pedal board specifically geared towards worship, I think spending a lot of your funds on a delay pedal is totally okay and probably even recommended. And the last pedal on the board for today's build is the MXR M300 Reverb. The M300 is an expansive reverb covering an array of sounds, including things like spring reverb sounds, modulated reverb sounds, and even pad reverb sounds. At just under 200 bucks, I think the M300 from MXR is not only a great pick for today's setup, but is probably one of the most underrated reverbs on the market today. And the pedal board that everything's mounted to is a simple DIY project that I slapped together using some pieces of scrap material that I had laying around the house. We're going to be using Hosa pancake style patch cables. I really dig these cables, and I've even had great experience with using the ends themselves and making custom links using raw cable and soldering them myself. But even in this format, I've used them a ton and have had no problems out of them. And I'm going to be recommending some budget-friendly but highly rated instrument cables. The amp that we're going to use is the Vox AC4. Vox is a pretty big name in the genre of worship music, and even folks that aren't using Vox are oftentimes using amps that are voiced like Vox amps. The AC4 is no different than all the other legendary amps within the Vox lineup. This is the newer one with the 12-inch speaker in it, and it sounds killer. For power, we're going to be using the One Spot from True Tone, and the One Spot is 1700 milliamps of output, which for what we're using today is plenty of power. And we're using the 5-way daisy chain adapter for the One Spot. And the tuner that we're going to be using is the Snark. There's not a whole lot to say about it other than the fact that it's accurate, it clips on the headstock of your guitar, it's battery powered, it's easy to see, and has a head that you can swivel around to where you can see it from about any angle. Also, the Snark tunes by vibration, so it doesn't need to hear your guitar. So that means you can turn your volume knob all the way down, have it clipped on the headstock of your guitar, and just tune that way. So it's still silent tuning. So first, I want to show you what just the guitar going into the amp sounds like. So I have the amp set up fairly clean. You can hear that it is breaking up a little bit, and that's to be expected because it's a 4-watt amp. So it doesn't have much headroom, which I think is actually a pretty good thing within the context of this setup. And that's because typically you would want a compressor of some kind for the sound that we're going for. But because the Vox AC4 is low wattage, that means that with just pushing it just a little bit, you're going to get some natural compression. All right, moving on to the pedals. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on each pedal individually because that's not really the purpose of this video, but I'm just going to run through them pretty quickly. First up is the Soulfood, and I have it set up for sort of an Electric 2 sort of sound right now where someone would be playing primarily like big open chords. So here's the amp alone, and with the Soulfood. It does have a lot more gain on tap, and I'll just demonstrate that quickly. Next up is the Pink Panther, and right now I have it set up for sort of a general quarter note, heavy modulated, heavy mix delay. And the last pedal being the MXR M300, I have it set up for just a big washy, sort of all-purpose reverb for the use within the context of a worship sound. I think with that sort of sound, you could kind of use the mix knob with your foot to get everything from reverb that's kind of behind everything to a super washy, swelly sounding reverb. So I'm just going to kind of play through some sounds and show you that this little rig is capable of doing what we would need it to do within the context of a worship setup. If you see me changing knob settings or any sort of settings on any of the pedals or even the amp, just know that I think that those are the kinds of changes that I think can be made in the moment. I think you could lean down and change the mix on your reverb. I think you could use your foot even and change the drive setting on your overdrive pedal. I don't think that we have to necessarily put ourselves in the box of we need 3 delay pedals and we have to have 3 overdrive pedals. Don't get me wrong, I dig stacking overdrives and stacking delays and even having preset capable reverb pedals. I think all that's killer. All I'm saying is that I think we can do what we need to do with a setup like this if you only have $1,000. this setup can do a lot more than just worship stuff too. I really do think this little rig sounds great, and I don't think there's much you couldn't accomplish within the context of a worship setting with this little setup. I really do think that with the ability to kneel down and make quick adjustments, leaving the amp setup fairly clean, and using a versatile delay and reverb like the Pink Panther and the M300, I really think you're covering a ton of territory. There's some alternatives too when you have $1,000 to spend that I think are worth your consideration. For example, you guys know that I am a believer in the Line 6 Helix family of products, and the Helix LT is a really good option and is just under $1,000. The issue there is that if you need to be able to play out at other venues other than your church, or if your church isn't micing you or something like that, the Helix LT may not be a great option, because you're going to need either a really good set of headphones to set up sounds at home, or a really good set of in-ear monitors or some studio monitors or something to dial in your sounds. Whereas with this setup, you can sit down in front of the amp and dial everything in. Now, I built out this setup with new gear in mind. So everything that we're looking at, all the pedals, all the accessories, the patch cables, the power, the amp, everything comes in new at under $1,000, or just over like $2 over $1,000 or something. But if you've got $1,000 to spend, you may consider the used market. Now, if you haven't been in this world for very long, or if you're not super familiar, there's tons of used classified sections, whether it be on Facebook. There's a website called reverb.com that I'll link to below that's an incredible resource for used gear. There's forums, like for example, the Gear Page is a great forum. There's a ton of ways to buy used gear from trustworthy people, and I've done so a lot and have never had any issues. Take something like the M300 Reverb, for example. We've discussed that it's a killer reverb. You could either pick it up used for probably in the $150 range instead of $200 and save yourself $50, or take that full $200 still with the full $1,000 setup in mind and drop it on something like a used Walrus Audio Descent. Then you get presets and you get a lot more usability and versatility out of something like that for your money, but it does require you buying it used. There's also tons of other delay options in the $250 range when you're willing to buy used. Like we said, the Pink Panther is killer, but if you're dropping $250 on reverb for a used delay, you're probably going to be able to get something that new would have been in the $350 or even $400 range. The Overdrive Pedal, that's another place where you could look on the used market and probably end up with something that was a lot more expensive when it was new than the Soulfood. It's no secret that gear is a big part of the electric guitar role within worship music, and a lot of the guys that we look up to that play this genre of music, they have gear that is way out of the reach for most of us. Most of us struggle to put together a $1,000 setup, much less a $10,000 or $12,000 or $15,000 setup. And I'm not saying that $1,000 is the minimum you can spend and get a killer setup. I think if you have some money set aside to spend on an electric guitar setup, and you have the patience to sit down and dial in sounds, work on parts, and really give yourself to the idea of it in general, I think for $300 to $500 you could even build a killer setup. Something like a used Pod HD 500X, which tons of people still use and love. For even less money, you could pick up a used 11 rack and grab some cheap MIDI controller to use with the 11 rack, and then you have a killer digital modeling setup. Well, that's the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns about any of the stuff we talked about today, drop those in the comment section below. The links to all the stuff we talked about in today's video are also in the description, and it really does help out the channel if you use those links. Otherwise, if you haven't subscribed to the channel and you liked today's stuff, there's lots more like this content to come. So please subscribe to the channel so that I can see you in the next video.